What's going on, guys? Josh here from Momentum Productions, and we are back to the basics, balancing glide cams. This is probably the most requested video I've been getting lately regarding stabilization systems, regarding actually these sorts of stabilization systems. However, my preference hasn't really changed since I started using electronic gimbals. I still do prefer electronic gimbals, but if you are one of those people who does still use a manual gimbal, I'm going to teach you how to properly balance it, and it's kind of like riding a bike. Once you learn how to properly balance this thing, you will never forget. All right, let's get started. So before we begin, I just want to talk about my setup really quick. I'm using the Glidecam 4000 along with the quick release system. This is a must and will greatly help you out with balancing, and I'm going to talk more about that in just a minute. And I'm also using the A7S Mark I along with the Zeiss 16-35mm f4 lens. This is probably the most common lens that I use with my gimbal stuff because it just gives me that beautiful wide look along with a 35mm look, which is more of that closer, more narrow look with a shallower depth of field. I also want to start off by saying that this is a trial and error process. So if you're not patient, then using a manual steadicam or Glidecam like this one here is not going to be your favorite thing. So this is how we're going to start this off. So a typical Glidecam or any other sort of manual steadicam works off of gravity. It works off of counterweights and proper balance. So when we mount our camera onto the base platform here, we are going to have to balance the camera in order to get a perfect center of gravity. And that's how a gimbal will work properly. So we have two areas of balance here. We have the top balance or the top base plate, and we have the bottom balance area, also known as the sled. This is where we add our counterbalance weights, and we are countering the weight of the camera. So I usually like to start off with one plate on each side, and then we work our way up if need be. So let's go ahead and start off by mounting our camera. With the quick release plate, all I have to do is just slip it right on. So once our camera has been mounted, we can test out the Glidecam by just letting it do its thing, letting go of the center boom pole here. And well, as you can see, it's really not that properly balanced. Now we actually have a third area of balance, and this is what I like to call invisible weight. And this is when we adjust the telescopic boom pole. So if we loosen up the center pole here, we can increase it by pushing it downward here. And what we're doing, we're adding leverage. We're adding invisible weight. So instead of adding more plates to the system, you can increase the size of the center boom pole here. Okay, so first of all, how do we know if we need to increase the weight? Well, you kind of just know based on how the Glidecam sways. If it feels like it's completely out of control swinging forward, that means that there is not enough counterbalance weight. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start off by increasing the telescopic boom post. I'm going to drop it down here as low as it can go. The lower it goes, the more invisible weight or leverage we are adding. Then we can lock it up. And now let's see how the balance is. As you can see, it doesn't want to swing as fast forward, which means that that weight helped out. Now, any Glidecam or steadicam that you're going to use, and even gimbals for that matter, are going to have different areas of movement on the base plate here. We can move it forward or backward or left and right, and that's going to help us out achieving a perfect balance. But as you can see here, with the boom post drop down like this and letting go of the Glidecam, it's still swinging uncontrollably. Don't forget that the base plate here is for micro adjustments. It's a lot smaller of an adjustment process than adding weight. It's not going to affect the Glidecam as drastically as adding that invisible weight or that physical weight. So because this Glidecam seems like it's completely out of control, I'm going to go ahead and add two more plates, one on each side of the sled. Now let's see how the Glidecam balances. Okay, you see that? It doesn't want to swing forward ridiculously anymore. Now, how do we achieve perfect balance? There has to be some sort of guideline, right? Well, here's the thing. We want to time our Glidecam to see how long it takes to get from this horizontal position to a perfectly vertical position. It should take no longer or no shorter than 2.5 to 3 seconds. So let's go ahead and try this out. Ready to drop in 3, 2, 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000. As you can see, it drops way too fast. It gets down to that vertical position in about 2 seconds. We want to increase that time. Now, because it drops down really fast, I know immediately it's because of the counterweight system. The counterweight is what's forcing the Glidecam to drop down fast. So what does that mean? Well, we can make a little adjustment to the telescopic boom post here. We can shorten up the leverage. We are going to decrease that invisible weight. We're going to decrease that leverage, and that should help us out with our drop time. So I'm going to decrease it to about there, and then lock it up. Just make sure it's aligned with the camera. Tighten it back up, and let's see how we did. Remember, horizontal to vertical. Ready to let go in 3, 2, 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000. Okay, awesome. So we got the timing almost perfect. We might even get a more precise time once we have everything properly balanced. So if we let the Glidecam do its own thing here and we let it go, you can notice that it wants to point down. It wants to point forward. What does that tell me immediately? It tells me that there's too much weight in the front of the camera. So what can we do to counteract that weight? Well, we can loosen up the base plate here and push it back. And this will help us counteract that front heaviness. So let's loosen up the base plate here and push it back. And it's also useful to have a table nearby, especially if this is your initial balance, because it will take you a while. You don't want your back to be stressed out or your arms. So loosen up all these screws here, and let's push the base plate back just a little bit. Okay. Then tighten everything back up and lift up the Glidecam again. It still wants to point forward. So let's loosen it up and push the base plate back even further. Let's try that. Let's pick it up and let's see what it does. Oh, wow, that's progress, guys. Now it wants to lean backwards, which means that the base plate is pushed too far back. There's way too much weight in the back of the Glidecam, so we have to push the base plate further. All right, look at that. It's almost perfect. It still leans a little bit forward, so let's push the base plate a tiny bit to the back. And there we go. The Glidecam is perfectly balanced on the tilt axis. However, as you can see, it wants to lean over to the left. We want it to be perfectly straight. So what do we need to do? We need to loosen up the left to right or right to left adjustment. So those adjustments are right under the base plate here. So I'm going to loosen those up. I'm going to push the base plate to the right to counteract that left heaviness. Okay, now let's pick it up and let's see what it does. Okay, now it wants to lean over to the right just a tad. So let's push the base plate over to the left a tiny bit. Okay, I think we just about got it. But as you can see here, it still doesn't look too reliable. So what are we gonna do? We're gonna do the drop time test again to see if we need to make any more major changes. So again, starting off in horizontal, timing it to vertical. 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000. As you can see, it's perfectly timed, so we don't have to make any major changes, just minor changes. So we are going to continue working with the base plate, and if your gimbal has this feature, you can even adjust the gimbal up or down. There we go. It can go up or down. I wouldn't worry about this too much, only if you plan on shooting in inverted mode, but sometimes gimbal adjustment does need to happen. But I know most Glidecams that you probably have, or I know some of the Glidecams or steadicams that I have, don't have a gimbal adjustment, so sometimes we don't have that luxury. But as you can see here, because I dropped the gimbal down, the Glidecam automatically wants to go into inverted mode, so you can actually get low angle shots this way. And I have a video specifically on the balancing of inverted mode, so go ahead and check it out right here. But long story short, you want to get the gimbal to a height just high enough where the handle of the gimbal doesn't touch or collide with the base plate. So right about there, and that's where I'm going to keep the gimbal. So now let's look at the balancing of the gimbal again, and let's see if it wants to lean any certain direction. You guys let me know what you think in the comment section below, but tilt looks good. And left to right looks good as well. We can do certain tests to see if everything's properly balanced aside from the drop time test. One of them is called the dynamic test, and what we're gonna do, we're gonna abruptly move the Glidecam left or right and forward and backward. Okay, I can already tell that there's an issue. Something is loose. I can feel the base plate moving, so I'm gonna make sure that everything is tightened up here. You don't want this thing to be loose while you're using it because you're gonna be changing your balance constantly, and then you're gonna have a really tough time using this setup. And what we're looking at here is making sure that the Glidecam stays in a straight line. As you can see here, it's not really in a straight line. So we're gonna have to make some more balancing adjustments, minor ones though. And that noise that we heard a little bit earlier is because my gimbal seems to be pretty loose. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna use an Allen key to tighten up these screws, and we shouldn't have that issue. But if your gimbal is loose, yes, it will go out of balance. So I'm gonna go ahead and fix that issue right now. Now, I tightened up some of these Allen key screws here, and since I did that, the Glidecam needs to be rebalanced. As you can see here, it wants to lean over to the left. So now let's make that adjustment. Perfect, look at that. It seems to be perfectly balanced on the tilt and the roll axis. Let's try the dynamic test again. As you see here, the Glidecam still wants to lean over to the right, but I notice that something is loose. Whenever I move the Steadicam left to right or right to left, I feel like the base plate is moving. So I'm gonna double check my screws. And as you can see here, I already know what the problem is, and it's the quick release plate. You can see how it's slightly turned. So that is my issue right now that I need to fix. So I'm gonna go ahead and tighten up the quick release system here. Now we are getting much better performance out of the Glidecam. It seems like my quick release system is causing a little bit of an issue, and it's because one of the screws just doesn't want to tighten up to that point where it just won't move. Remember that it should be extremely tight when mounting it onto your base plate. So why would you need a quick release system, by the way? Well, it's a lot better to have a quick release system and quickly mounting your camera than having to take apart your base plate and mounting your camera that way. So that's why I use a quick release system. You can also make micro balancing adjustments by loosening up the quick release plate and pushing it forward or backward. Also, don't forget that when you're using a zoom lens and you're changing focal length, you are also going to be changing the balance of your whole rig. Now, one last thing before we close out this video, why would you want to use a manual Glidecam or Steadicam over an electronic gimbal? As of right now, I'm only using electronic gimbals. They are easy to use, they're very portable, they're small, and the setup time is so fast, a lot quicker than any manual stabilizer like this one here. Now, there is one major advantage to this sort of manual gimbal, and that is the price point. It's 150 bucks. A Glidecam, obviously, a real Glidecam is gonna be a lot more expensive, but these cheapo manual Steadicams, Glidecams, whatever you want to call them, they do get the job done, but the learning curve is massive, which is why I stick to using electronic gimbals. I already know how to use these professionally, but when it comes down to setup time, ease of use, and portability, an electronic gimbal will be a lot better of a choice for me for my shoots. But if budget is an issue and you want to stick to something like this, that's perfectly fine. Just remember there is a massive learning curve, but you will still get smooth shots. I have a ton of Glidecam tutorials right here in this playlist, so make sure you check it out. Now, one last thing, a lot of people have been messaging me about rotation, awkward rotation of the Glidecam. If everything is properly balanced, you're not gonna have any rotation issues. Usually when people think they have their Glidecam balanced and they let go, it seems to wanna rotate one way or rotate the other way. Now this can come from both hardware issues or balance issues. A lot of the time, I would say about 95% of the time, it is a balance issue. I've had gimbals before in the past where the gimbal itself, this little piece right here, was not properly aligned and that caused some leaning and rotation, but most factories have fixed that issue. So if you do see some rotation, do look at your balance. Keep re-watching this video over and over again until you get this thing properly balanced. It's a process, but the more you do it, the easier it becomes over time. I can get this thing balanced in probably less than 2 minutes. It also depends on the quality of the parts used. I have another manual Steadicam or Glidecam that's called the Lang. It's a lot easier to balance than this one. I'll also leave a link for it in the description box below. It actually has micro adjustment knobs, so I don't have to individually loosen up each knob to make my left and right or forward and backward adjustment. I can just loosen up one little silver knob and it will do that adjustment. So if you want to get something like that, it is more expensive. It's also made out of carbon fiber. I'll leave a link for it in the description box below. And yeah, that should just about do it. If this video has helped you out, please give it a like, share it with your friends, and subscribe to my channel with notifications on. If you want me to do more tutorials on manual stabilizers, let me know in the comment section below. And if you want me to do a full comparison between the look of a manual stabilizer and an electronic stabilizer, also let me know and I'll do a comparison for you there. And ergonomically, guys, I will say this again, electronic gimbals are better. You are going to be much happier with them. But I do understand if budget is an issue, so don't feel obligated. Everybody needs to start somewhere, and this is where I started. All right, guys, that's enough talking for me today. I'll see you guys in the next video, and I can't wait to see what you create. Peace.